Hello everyone! In today's video, you're going to learn color composition. So what is color composition? Simply put, it's the interaction of different colors. As you know, different colors can evoke different feelings. What's more, the feelings that colors arouse are also affected by different light conditions. For today's video, I want to introduce two sets of colors to show what the color composition will look like. The two sets are chromatic colors and achromatic colors. I would like to define what achromatic color is first. Achromatic means without color. So achromatic color is color without color. That seems like it makes no sense, right? Well, think of actual color or chromatic color as being any color with one of the primary colors in them. What about black, gray, and white? That's right. These colors have no color in them, unlike other colors having color in them, such as orange, orange-yellow, or yellow-orange, green, blue, and purple. Colors like these are chromatic colors. When achromatic and chromatic colors meet each other, a strong visual effect can be created. So now let's start practicing using the interaction of the two color types. First, you can make a line drawing on the paper of whatever object you want to draw, like an animal, a food, or whatever you'd like to draw. I'm going to draw a flower. Before we get started, let's review the techniques we learned in the last video. Remember the first technique I showed you? This is straight line flat coloring. The next one is Z-line flat coloring. So you can see that when we use Z-line flat coloring, we can get a color block that is quite uniform. If you shorten the parallel distance when you do the Z-line flat coloring, you will get a more uniform color block. Another technique we did is sweeping. In today's video, I will use these techniques in the drawings. Okay, so we first need to make a line drawing of whatever subject matter we like. This is what mine looks like. So here, to keep the video shorter, I'm not going to show you how I drew the drawing of this flower. Here you see the flower. Now let's color it in. Before we get started, we need to prepare the markers with the colors we need when coloring. I like to be organized, so these are the ones I will need for the rest of this video. So I'll color the flower part with these four colors which are commonly used in flower coloring. And I'll color the leafy parts with these four green colors. So in today's video, we'll learn the interaction of achromatic and chromatic colors. So I'll add to the drawing and these achromatic colors since the flower color and leaf color are chromatic colors. Before we color the flower, we need to identify which part is playing the leading role among all the parts of the drawing, or rather, which part we want to stand out. So for my drawing, the focus is obviously the flower part, right? To make my flower part stick out, I'll color it with the chromatic colors and the other parts with achromatic colors. Since the focus of the part was highlighted through the interaction of chromatic and achromatic colors, it can be done the other way around too. You can take the leaf part as the focus and color it with chromatic colors, and the flower part as the background and color it with achromatic colors. For the drawing in this video, I will make the flower the primary focus. Oh, I just noticed that I didn't tick the line properly here. That's embarrassing. Okay, so I'm going to color the background first and then fix my mistake. So how do we show the focus of the drawing? The focus part is the flower, which means the flower must shine and stand out. So I will not highlight the background part. Here I'll only use black to color the background. Of course, you can use other achromatic colors such as gray to color the background if you want to see what the different achromatic colors would look like in the background. Now, let's color the background part. For drawings like line drawings or decorative paintings, we tend to use the Z-line coloring technique to shorten the parallel distance as much as possible, because we need to make sure that the drawing is neat and clean. So let's start coloring it. We can do it within a small range each time we do the Z-line coloring block if we don't want to accidentally go over the lines into the other part. Try to keep the brush strokes of different blocks the same direction to make the blocks look neat. When we color the corners like this, we can use the sharp point of the chisel tip to fill in the little gaps. Did you notice that my paper is crooked? It's always like this no matter whether I'm drawing or writing. It's a pretty bad habit of mine. Please don't pick up this bad habit too. When coloring the larger space, I freely start wherever seems natural. That's the way it should be. You can also start coloring the drawing wherever it suits you. I don't like taking off the caps over and over again, so I decided to fill these gaps now by using the sharp point of the marker. You can also fill these in at the end when all the coloring is finished if you prefer. When you do the line drawing at the beginning, it's better to choose a strong waterproof pen. Otherwise, the lines will be very fuzzy and the drawing will not look clean, since the alcohol in the marker tip will react with the poor quality ink and really bleed the lines out. Even when there is such a tiny gap like this, I use the Z-line coloring method to shorten the parallel distance, not only because this way the drawing can stay neat and clean, but also because we are using black here. You know that black is a dominant color, very noticeable, so when we're using it as a background color, we need to make sure that we don't have obvious brushstrokes. It is definitely okay if you want to start from the flower part. The only reason why I'm starting with the background is that I want to fix the messy lines that I made by mistake. Okay, so we're finished coloring the background. Obviously, you can see that the background part is very shallow and our focus is already standing out quite a bit. So this is how the drawing looks, through an interaction of black and white at this point. Now let's add more colors and see what will come out. So here are two buds. For the buds, I'd like to use a shallow color because a bud is not fully mature. Before it dries out, let's do some shading. When we color the flower or the plants, we need to bring out the texture of them. For example, you see that the flower is growing upwards, so the direction of my coloring should be upwards also. If you color in the wrong direction, it will be unnatural to our eye. Remember this tip. We can add a little more to the bud. We can make a decoration here. Let's use our fine tip. If you don't think the fine tip is sharp enough, you can use the sharp point on the chisel tip. Let's finish the other bud. So you can see here the brushstroke of the line smudges. That's why we need a waterproof needle pen. Here, let's make it moist enough. And do the shadings. So the two buds are finished. Next, let's color the petals. I'd like to make the petal red. I'll use the lighter red first and then overlay it with the darker red. Let's call it Jacinth. You might notice that the strokes traveled a little bit over the line if you are a sharp-eyed audience. What should we do with this? I'm not going to worry about it because it doesn't really matter. Just be bold and do it freely. Why didn't I color this part? Because it's the stamen. So I want to do it in a different color. As for the space, it flies out toward us and shows us the inner part of the petal. From our point of view, the color we see here should be different since there is a light from a different direction. So let's color the part with the different color. Okay, it will be a little bit lighter, so I'll just use the lighter jacinth to color it. Now you see the color difference that we created as well as the three-dimensional space. Now let's use a darker red to make the texture on the petals. So here we can use a sweeping stroke. You may notice that the texture isn't very obvious. That's normal because it hasn't dried out yet. Next, I will use the same jacinth to fill the gaps and make a transition. Okay, so let me fix the messy line that you saw earlier. It's pretty easy. We just use a number 0 marker to cover it. The smudge will disappear once it dries out. It's done. As for the stamen, I'll use yellow because it's the lightest one among all these colors. You can color it very freely. Next, I'll use the stippling technique we just learned in the last video. I'm going to add some dots on the stamen to create a sense of space. Because we don't want the stamen to look like it is attached to the petals. Now we've finished the first flower, and for the second flower, I was going to make it a little different by making it orange, a little bit lighter than the first flower. Don't worry about the strokes traveling outside of the lines a little bit. Here you can see I'm sweeping on the petals. Since the strokes that sweeping creates coincide with the way the texture spreads, I really like the shape of these strokes for this part. You can change the position of the paper as you like. The strokes went out again, but don't worry. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. There it goes again. Okay, so now look at the two upturned parts. I'd like to use a different color on them. Why? Because the first flower we saw the upturned part showing us the inner petals colored with a lighter color. So for this flower, the upturned parts show us the outer petals. So they should be colored darker. So I'll color the two parts with the darker color. So this way you can see a space was created. And now for the strokes outside the lines, let's use the number 0 marker to cover them. But remember, this is only useful when the strokes are small ones. If they ruin a larger area, the number 0 marker won't be able to handle it. Okay, now let me color the center part. I'm going to make it darker. I'll sweep from inside to outside. So here you can see the strokes have already dried out. They are quite obvious, but it's not a big deal. We can make a transition later to make it less obvious. You can also choose not to do the transition because, like I said, the strokes coincide with the texture of the flower, so it's up to you whether or not to make a transition. So now let me show you how to make transitions if you want to try. I use sweeping strokes to make the transition. Why? Because as we learned in the last video, because the tail swept out by the brush stroke is not so heavy, when it dries, it can fade into the color behind it. This way, it helps the tail better integrate in the upper part of the petal, which is light as well. What's more, I didn't want to make the obvious strokes too uniform after sweeping on the upper part, because the texture itself should be natural and casual. But if you don't like that, you can make it clean and neat. Now the only part we need to color are the leaves. Let's use one color first, then use a different color to do the shading. Let me check out the green colors first. This group of green colors are quite dark, and since the background is black, I prefer to use a relatively lighter green to do the massive coloring to make the leaves pop. But now I'm going to use the darkest green to fix the strokes that went outside the lines. So you see a dark green leaf? You might be thinking, why not apply the same lighter green color group to the other leaves in case all of these leaves are not as dark as the black background? But remember, if you use the same green, your drawing will be very flat and the color is too plain. We need color variation within the drawing. Okay, sorry, I just noticed that I forgot one leaf needed to be colored dark green here. Let me finish that first. Okay, that's all for the dark green leaves. Next, let me do the stamen part. I'll use yellow and color it freely, the same as usual. Then I'll use the darker red to do the stippling. Now let me finish the rest of the leaves. First, let me find the lighter green. We'll use it to make the bulk of the coloring. Don't forget the 2 flower buds. They have a green part too. As I mentioned before, we need to do some shading on the leaves. Where should we do it? We can do it where 2 objects meet with each other. The strokes of the shading must follow the direction that the leaves grow. So now you can see a space was created after shading. Okay, we're all done with today's lesson. If you have time, you can practice making a drawing of a flower colored with achromatic colors and a background of chromatic color. I've already drawn one here. You can see that the 2 effects of these techniques are very different. Which one do you like more? Why not practice a little more with the one that you like? That's the end of this video. I'll see you next time.